let's get into a little bit of intel, man. Some stuff that we've maybe probably written about on Gamecock Central already. I know you've got some stuff up today. And if you want to read more about Giwa, I've got some stuff up on him too. And got some recruiting stuff going up today and tomorrow as well. They had some prospects on campus, including, I would say, a very intriguing new offer to an in-state prospect from Sumter, who plays quarterback but is being recruited by Carolina as a running back. If we have time, we'll get into him. But I'll have an article up either today or tomorrow with his reaction to that offer. And Chris, like I said, let's talk about maybe some newcomers who just have continued to generate buzz, or maybe even a few guys who have taken a step forward, it appears so far this offseason. And I always think it's fascinating, man, when the freshmen get here and the combination of the guys that kind of just early on do kind of what we expect, even though they're freshmen. And I would put Jazavian Currents right there in that category. And, you know, you look, so Torian Gray was asked about Currents today and said, you know, he absolutely is going to have an opportunity to play a lot this year if he keeps coming along. I think that's someone we've kind of circled as like, hey, he may start this year. He may just push guys aside and be too good not to be on the field. Highly recruited, as we've talked about, had the massive senior year, played his best ball, has just hit the ground and continued to do that. And then, you know, I think you look at other guys who maybe don't quite have that buzz. You know, I would put Julian Walker like in that same category as Currents. Highly recruited, big senior year, has kept it going into spring ball, has been on the field a ton during spring ball, and it's going to play in some form or fashion this year. But then you got your guys like, you know, Cassie Barnes, who we've mentioned a couple times. You've got, you know, even Tristan Lewis, who comes in as a quarterback at Greenwood, starting to create some buzz for what he's done in camp so far. Noah Clark, to me, Chris, may be the kid. There's an argument to be made that Noah, we've heard more buzz, like the difference in buzz we've heard about Noah Clark compared to my expectations for him in year one. Like, I'm not saying that I didn't think he was going to be a good player, but just in year one, when I looked at who returns at defensive tackle, when I look at who they added at defensive tackle, when I look at Aiden Harris at defensive tackle as a fellow freshman, I was talking about the transfers there in terms of who they were added at first. Then you add in Aiden Harris. I thought, you know, Noah might be a guy come in, red shirt, reshape his body, get used to. I mean, he's going to be asked to be that big, true nose or one technique, massive kid. It's just one of the most difficult things to do in football is play that spot as a true freshman. But, man, people do not stop talking about Noah Clark and how easy he's made it look so far.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you got to square that with, like, the reality that South Carolina brought in 3 defensive tackles who have collegiate experience. And with Tomey, a ton. Kelby Collins at 2 different SEC schools, at Jordan Thomas, you know, played a little bit at Georgia, but has been in a college program for a while now and is huge, right? And then returning guys, you know, Troy Pikes, Gabriel Brownlow-Dendy, 2 freshmen who redshirted last season on this roster. So there is competition, but man, you're right. You don't stop hearing about this kid. And I think defensive tackle is one of those positions where it is, frankly, hard to get on the field as a true freshman. But I will say, with what we've heard about Noah so far, it does make you wonder, can he get on the field some and play not just some garbage time, late game snaps, but like some legitimate snaps? And I think at this point, you can't really rule it out. I think he's been better than expected in a lot of areas. One of them is just, if you've ever seen Noah Clark, he is a human eclipse. I mean, he is massive. I do think he's going to continue optimizing his body to where, you know, he's still kind of a baby face kid, right? I remember from the high school recruiting process, I think he's younger than his age a little bit. So he has a lot of growth that he can still do in those areas, but he moves really well for a guy that size. What is he? 6'5", 340, I think maybe is his listing, something like that. He moves well. He's heavy-handed. He's powerful. He's a really nice kid, but he has aggression, on the field from what we've heard. And so he has certainly created some buzz. And, as much as fans like big, huge defensive tackles in the game and here at South Carolina, I feel like he should probably be generating a little bit more buzz. Maybe it's just Wes tell me who's on the team when they get here. Maybe it's a focus, an outsized focus on transfer portal gets, but there's still some really good prospects and maybe year one players from this freshman class for South Carolina who could factor in this year. So time will tell if that ends up being Noah Clark. Maybe not as much as a Jazavian Currents, for instance, because of positional need, but he's absolutely created some buzz throughout spring so far.
Yeah, and I think, man, worth giving Jordan Thomas a little bit of love. I think too. I would say it certainly seems like Tomiwa and Kelby Collins, as veterans of the guys who have played a lot, they come in. You would say at least with a leg up on someone like Jordan Thomas, who has not played a ton, even though he's a transfer, but lots of ability there too, man. And I think the fascinating thing there is that they were in a hole at that position going into last offseason when TJ and Boogie, Taka, all those guys left, and you were going, man, they got to go portal, and then you get caught in that loop of portal. Well, they're going to lose a lot from this year's squad if you go ahead and fast forward ahead of this season, but they may have recruited themselves out of that loop by not only adding a guy like Kelby, a guy like Tomiwa, but adding Jordan Thomas, who can come in, get used to everything, maybe play some this year, but then, move into a bigger role next season. You have Troy Pikes, who, played in the reserve role, probably takes on a little bit bigger role this year, and then has another year of eligibility after this season. And then you add in the freshmen, of course, and Noah and Aiden Harris, who we're talking about, and you're not going to quite be in a spot it doesn't seem on paper right now where you're going to have to say, well, we have to flip this entire room again, which is just very difficult to hit. I mean, it sounds like they actually hit on all those evaluations, which is very, very hard to do. And you don't want to count on that every year, because if you have a year where you get the reverse of that and you just miss on a bunch of guys, then you find yourself in trouble. So yep. I think that's a good sign for the defensive tackles in 2026, but also there are some foundational elements there now if you're looking ahead to the defensive tackle room in 2027. And then past that, man, you really can't even start looking ahead too far these days. If you're 2 years ahead at a spot, you actually have to feel pretty decent in today's kind of structure with the way things are.
Yeah, and to go back to what you said about hitting, I think Carolina, it appears, may have hit on all three levels at defensive tackle, and that room, I think, has a chance, just based on what we've heard in spring so far, has a chance to be a strength, assuming they stay healthy in that room, to be a strength of the entire roster. And I'd put it in two categories, right? To make sure that people don't come away saying South Carolina's going to have the best defensive tackle room in the SEC. You've always got to wait until you see how things go against live competition against opponents, right? It's similar to the offense, right? Even though we've heard some good things offensively about how good the new scheme has been and how good Browse has been for the offense and for Sellers, if you're taking the, hey, show it on the field approach, that's very fair. I think that's what you and I are taking, Wes, in terms of this, because you never know until you get out there against live opponents in the SEC, against the schedule South Carolina plays, to see. But I also think there's some value to hearing, are you hearing positives or negatives, right? So if we were in spring ball right now and we had heard, this is just an example, well, the freshmen have hit a wall. It's kind of slow going. Ooh, I really don't know, man, if we hit on these transfers, like they just don't really look like what we thought they would be. Your antenna goes up, like you're a little alarmed. But what we've heard so far makes you think, all right, they have a chance because you know what you brought back. You were able to do well on the retention front there. The freshmen, especially with Noah Clark, there's been some positive returns, and there's been positive returns on the 3 transfers as well in terms of, hey, they are what we thought they would be, or in some cases, maybe more. Doesn't mean necessarily it's going to translate, but what we have heard so far, you'll take that all the time. And I think they're what, how many practices down? 8, 9, something like that.
I think 9 is
9, yeah. 9 was, I think, this weekend, maybe 10. We'll get a viewing window tomorrow morning on Tuesday, Wes, for I think number 10 or 11. So, you still have some questions about this team, right? Like just what we've heard so far. You might have questions about a few different positions more than others, but you also feel like there's been progress made in some other areas too.
Yeah, for sure. And I understand people taking a wait and see on a lot of this stuff, man, but it does still at least if you already, to your point, if you already have big questions about a spot right now and you brought in a bunch of guys and it's just not what you want it to be yet, then that's going to be a question from now into the season until you feel like maybe some guys step up or some guys develop or there's not really a spring portal anymore. And there's a lot of legislation out there right now about trying to keep teams from doing the old non-portal transfer as well. So in a lot of ways, unless you find another hidden rugby player who can come in a lot of ways, your roster is your roster at this point. So